Hello, everyone. I'm Rob, and welcome to Starfield Pulse, your weekly Starfield podcast on everything that happened in the news this week. We're recording this live on Monday, June 26th on Twitch at 8 p.m., but you'll be able to find it on all your favorite podcast services later on during the week. Since this is the first episode, I wanted to cover a little bit of like the, not ground rules per se, but the format which this podcast was going to take place in. The vision of the show, if you will. The first section will be dedicated to the news. The second segment will cover community stories. I could have guessed I could talk about topics that the community is engaged in over social media, and I do a couple of those things later on in the run of show. Towards the end, I'll take comments and questions from the community, but stick around after the show because after the main show, I'll field questions that we've received over Twitch during the stream and answer those to the best of my ability. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. Last week, I put out a video on my main channel, and at the beginning, I called Starfield quite possibly the biggest game ever for Microsoft. And I said, I don't think that's hyperbolic. I think that is a very true statement. And we're starting to see things come out in this court case between the FTC and Microsoft that is really backing up that assertion. Microsoft bought Bethesda as a play to keep Sony from having Starfield on the PlayStation 5. Microsoft had seen how Sony was cutting deals with Bethesda to have exclusivity on Ghostwire Tokyo and also on Deathloop, right? So one very well-received game and one I thought was a fun game, Ghostwire Tokyo. I actually platinumed it. But regardless, this writing was on the wall. We've all seen this. Sony was trying to get exclusive deals with Bethesda and had done it, and Microsoft decided to push back, and they did to the tune of $7.5 billion, right? And so they have a massive acquisition in the air right now with Activision Blizzard for about let's just call it $70 billion, especially when you consider all the money they're spending in lawyers' fees right now. It's going to go way north of there on the price if this deal actually gets to close. But we have a lot riding, I say we, but Microsoft has a lot riding on the success of Starfield. And Todd Howard really kind of feels that. And he acknowledged that a few weeks ago in an interview on the Summer of Gaming with Ryan McCaffrey over on IGN, right? So Microsoft purchased ZeniMax really to get Starfield away from Sony. That's huge, huge. So, I mean, people don't really associate Master Chief with Microsoft anymore. If you think of like, what do you think of when you think of Xbox? You know, yes, Halo was there, but Halo doesn't have the prestige that it once did. Bethesda Game Studios, Todd Howard, they still have that shine. Say what you may about the performance issues that Fallout and Elder Scrolls, those games have when they release. They do eventually get to the point where they are extremely high quality games. They have massive communities around them and they make a ton of money and they move a lot of units. So we'll get a little quote here that came out of the hearings. It's what I'd say more recently, and this is from Phil Spencer. What I'd say more recently is that with a competitor who's paying third parties to skip our platform, is that we've felt it's necessary for us to secure ownership of more content so we can have more input into that content on our platform and in our subscription. ZeniMax is a great example of that. When we acquired ZeniMax, one of the impetus for that was that Sony had done a deal for Deathloop and Ghostwire, as came up yesterday, to effectively pay Bethesda to not ship those games on Xbox. So the discussion about Starfield, when we heard that Starfield is potentially also going to end up on skipping Xbox, we can't be in a position as a third place console that where we fall further behind on our content ownership. So we've had to secure content in order to remain viable in the business, right? So Microsoft was concerned that Starfield was also going to skip the Xbox and end up being a PlayStation 5 exclusive. And so they took a drastic measure. They wrote a checkbook that really only Microsoft could, because keep in mind, Xbox is Microsoft, and Microsoft is a company that's valued at like multiple $1 trillion. It's one of only a handful of companies in the world that is worth that much money. Sony is nowhere near that. When it comes right down to it, like Microsoft is the giant if this story was Jack and the Beanstalk. And Sony is Jack. Yes, when it comes to the console video game space, Sony definitely dominates, I mean, by Microsoft's own admission, the Xbox right now. But that's not how it goes in everything else that those two companies do business. So more to be said. There's a lot going on. We're learning a lot in this trial. There's more that's come out today about different plays that Microsoft tried to make when buying Sega, potentially buying some other studios of note. We're not really going to get into that at this moment. We're more focused on, Starfield, but this just shows how important this game is to this platform and to this company, right? So Starfield has to do good, especially after the first game from Bethesda that came out at a $69.99 price point. Redfall didn't quite do so well. Some other things that have come up too recently is that it's taken, I believe, 8 years for this game to come out. This is the first mainline Bethesda Game Studios game in 8 years, right? So that's how long it's been since Fallout 4. They don't really consider Fallout 76 to be a mainline Bethesda Game Studios game because it's not. Fallout is one of their properties, but this was really, they did work on it, but they weren't the primary creative force behind that game. So it's been a very long time since that last game came out, and that last game being Fallout 4. So if we continue to look at how long it takes these games to come out, and Todd Howard has said that he wants to be the visionary director. He wants them to be the creative force behind Fallout 5. If we're doing another 8 years, how many games does Todd have left into him? So if I'm Microsoft, I really want this game to do great, right? And then I want to figure out a way how to split Bethesda Game Studios up and get parallel development on Elder Scrolls 6, Fallout 5, and Starfield 2, because you can't have these 3 giant IPs and only having a game come out for each of them every 24 years, because that's 3 times 8. And that's if your development cycle falls to be 8 years per. I mean, you can't do that. You spent too much money. You got to sell some units. You got to make some games. You got to put them out there, right? Another big news we had was Kindafunny Xcast had Todd Howard as a guest come and sit down with them. And we learned a lot of different things during that interview. And I put out a video earlier on my main channel where I did talk about the top 10 things, which kind of spun out of control and ended up being like 17 kind of funny or kind of interesting facts that came out of that interview. And I wanted to go through a few of those real quick and not get too in depth on them, but really touch base on them because I think that there are some great knowledge and things that people want to know about. First off, there's no space fishing. And there was a big kind of background to this question. It really boiled down to that real scientists feel that the potential for us to find extraterrestrial life will probably be in these underwater oceans on some of these planets or on some of the moons that surround the gas giants within our own solar system. So it's kind of funny. It's like, will there be space fishing? And at first you kind of laugh it off and like, ha 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 ha, space fishing. Why would you go space fishing? And then it's like, oh, there is the potential for life. And that's probably one of the best ways for us to find life outside of our planet would be in the oceans on these other giant intergalactic bodies. Right? There's no mounts. So you're not going to be able to climb the local fauna and ride them around and kill other things. But it also means that there's no rovers, which I found interesting, seeing as that we are already capable of actually sending rovers into space, right? And having those go across planets and do scouting for us. Why would we not be able to do that in a game? Like take a rover with us. Oh, and by the way, we can do that on the moon. We can ride rovers on the moon when we do go there. So the technology in real life exists for us to do these things. It's kind of interesting that the technology wouldn't exist for us to do those in video games. 3, Brendan Hunt, better known as Coach Beard on Ted Lasso, is a DJ in Fallout 4. Number 4, you can only romance the 4 constellation companions. So there are romance options in this game, but those will be the only options you have to have a full story romance with those characters. Number 5, you can go through the game and do it without companions. Number 6, if you steal a ship, can you upgrade it? Yes, you can. But if you do, you'll have to register it, right? And so this has to do with keeping the economy in check. This is designed to be more of an end game activity. Once you've completed the game, or become close to ending the main narrative. Or, I mean, really, you just don't have to do the main narrative at all. You can go on a tangent and doing your own thing. But this is designed to be one of those things that you sink a lot of time into this ship collecting and ship improvement. And so if you do steal a ship and you want to upgrade that stolen ship, you're going to have to register it in order to do that. Ship designs have inner parts as well, so it helps give the inside of a ship a unique feel, as well as having the external hull be unique as well. 8, you'll have to gear up to get into some planets. They'll have heat, radiation, they could have ailments, monsters that want to kill you. So as you uncover these like Goldilocks planets that do support life, you won't necessarily be able to just go down on there. And actually other planets that aren't Goldilocks planets that have more extreme temperatures that you would want to mine resources from, you'll have to be cognizant of that and create yourself better equipment to get there, or get skills that allow you to mitigate those high risk areas. Music is so important that they start working on it right away. It's concept art and then music. Number 10, was it ever under consideration to do a performance mode? No. They never looked to take away features. They wanted consistency overall. Number 11, everyone in the game's development watches Digital Foundry. It's a great channel. They do wonderful breakdowns. That's my little addition there, not Todd's. But Todd, said that everybody in games development watches Digital Foundry. So kudos to that team over there. And that, it's high praise from a well-regarded developer that most people hold in high esteem. Todd feels that this is the best feeling Bethesda game yet. Gary from the Kindafunny Xcast did ask about side quests and was like, hey, right, is this going to be, and this is my words too, Final Fantasy 16 level terrible side quests where you're just sent to do fetch quests, go do 3 things, come back, do other 3 things. And they were, I don't want to go on a tangent on that game, but they're pretty bad. So anyways, Todd acknowledged the fact that there is some gamification in these quests and that they will be present in Starfield. However, that they are supplemented with very deep story quests. So hopefully you do get the payoff. Are you going to have somebody say, hey, can you go get me like 3 bits and bobs from X, Y, and Z? And you go and do that and you come back and you get rewarded with a hat and a scarf and maybe a couple coins. Those will be there, but they'll be fewer and further between. And hopefully that you can forgive them because those exist and they'll be in the game. Todd listens to podcasts because he actually called Gary out on asking him that question. He had mentioned that he heard Gary talk about the fact that those quests were going to exist in Starfield because of how big the game was, and that Todd knew he was going to ask that question, and he really wanted to have the opportunity to talk to Gary about it. Number 15, Todd thinks that this will be a modder's paradise. They look forward to see what the community creates, and they love being able to support this, not just being for hobbyists, but something that this can actually turn into a career for them. Number 16, outposts are another system that are meant to be for the end game. In order to build, you can build pretty much whatever you want, but in order to do so, that will require you to level up your character and also collect a lot of resources. It's going to be very resource intensive. But at the end of that, they could also be things that help you generate additional resources. Number 17, when asked whether or not there are black holes in the game, Todd would not answer. So I'm thinking that is definitely a yes. It's going to be a yes for 2 reasons. You're either going to encounter a black hole and it's going to be like, oh my God, there's this amazing black hole. This is so cool. Just because you randomly ran into it and they hid them throughout. Or it's going to be a set piece thing where there's going to be a quest along the main storyline, or maybe it's a really big side quest that funnels you to that black hole. So I think it's going to be something he didn't want to spoil, that most people are going to come across and they're going to be like, wow, this is fantastic. And Todd didn't want to spoil that surprise for them. Something else that we just got clarification on today, right, was whether or not there was going to be a physical disc inside of Starfield when you purchased it. So Alan Wake's developer Remedy recently announced that it was going to have a digital only release, right? And it created a bit of a backlash. People are like, well, if I'm buying this game, I want physical media with it. And most people on PC, that's gone the way of the dodo. We've known this for a long time. But for people who have consoles, they want to buy a box and they want that box to have a disc, myself included. I I like to purchase physical media. That way, if a game is not great, I can always flip it and, get some of my money back and purchase something else. And that way I don't feel like I'm completely out. However, I would like to mention that Skyrim is the first PC game box that I ever purchased, and I took home and I opened up and it did not have a disc inside of it. It had a Steam code. And I was like, man, I have been avoiding Steam like the plague forever. And then I finally had to download Steam and install Skyrim. And this, I probably had dial-up still. So thanks for making me have to install Skyrim on my PC over dial-up, Bethesda. Regardless, people were concerned that they were not going to have a physical disc. There were some inklings on social media from Bethesda Game Studios as well that made it allude to like some of these higher end collector's editions would have like a code engraved on them and wouldn't actually have a disc. It's like, wait a minute, I want my disc. Well, it turns out that Bethesda has confirmed that physical versions of the standard edition of Starfield for Xbox will include a disc. This confusion began on June 25th when the support Twitter account tweeted that all physical versions of the upcoming game would include a code instead of a disc. But they have subsequently come out and said that Starfield Standard Edition is included with Xbox Game Pass, game disc included with physical purchase of Xbox and Standard Edition, game code included with physical purchase on PC Standard Edition. So if you do purchase it, obviously on PC, you're getting a Steam code, but if you purchase it for the Xbox, you're going to get a disc. Now, if you purchase the upgrade version, like I believe it's the Constellation version, similar to how Redfall had the Bite Back edition that comes with the Steelbook and a patch, that will not come with a disc. That will only be a code for you to upgrade your version that you have. And part of that is because you're reliant on either have purchased the game already and that disc, so you can't have two discs going at the same time, or you have it digitally somehow, some digital rights management involved with it, whether you're doing it from Game Pass or you purchased it digitally, you would be dependent upon that for that to work. So you're not going to get a disc just for that extra enhanced edition. So a little bit more about Todd talking to Ryan McCaffrey on the Summer of Games. All the video you see right now currently on display is courtesy of IGN. So Ryan did kind of ask Todd, we were talking earlier about how important this is for Microsoft, if he felt that pressure. And he alluded to the fact that he had, and I don't think he really kind of bent to the gravitas of how important this game actually is, but he recognizes it's there. He knows, right? He knows. It's not going to come out and say that. But he did acknowledge that he feels some of the pressure. He knows the pressure's there. And Ryan asked what has been done with the extra time. And basically the studio has spent this playing the game a ton to make sure it's balanced, it's fun, performance, and they've been doing bug fixing. And, we've heard that answer recently from another game studio as well. And that was one of the divisions out of Nintendo. And that was The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And that is by far one of the best games that's come out, not only this year, but probably in the last 50 years. The game is a masterpiece. If you have access to a Switch and you haven't played it yet, I suggest that you do. It'd be a great way to spend the next 60 some days that you have to make, do something with your time until Starfield comes out. But again, we're going to talk about Starfield. Great answer, right? So they're making sure it's balanced. They're making sure it's fun. They're working on performance and they're working on bug fixing. Redfall didn't perform 30 frames on console traditionally. What are we looking at, right? So Ryan was concerned about Redfall not cutting muster, said it was going to be at 60 frames. Then they very shortly before launch came out and said it was 30 frames. People were like, okay, well, it's going to be 30 frames. Not that big of a deal. Yes, people were concerned, but I don't think alarm bells were going off for people yet. And then the game came out and it was bad. Not no fun to be had there, but there were some serious issues. So now it's only logical that we can conclude that if Starfield is having some, all of a sudden stuck at 30 frames, maybe we're going to have some problems there too. But this is where Todd told Ryan that, he's glad he asked. It should come as no surprise. They're hyper focused on detail. It does support 4K on the X and it's 1440 on the S. It is locked at 30 frames per second on the consoles. And is because they prefer the consistency. Very key there, right? It's locked at 30 on the console. So if you're playing this on Steam, this doesn't impact you. So you don't have to fret about it. I've seen a lot of people get really concerned about this. And if you're playing on the console and you don't like 30 frames per second, you're entitled to your opinion. I mean, you definitely see a difference. So if you don't like that, I don't know what to tell you other than I'm sorry you don't like that. But I think there's legitimate reasons for it to be like that. However, if you're on the PC, you'll be able to play it at your preferred FPS because it will not be locked, right? But let's also talk about that 30 frames per second lock. Again, and I will refer back to Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. That game also does not perform 30 frames per second almost anywhere, right? It really actually underperforms that in a lot of different places. So in that situation, though, gameplay wins out over visual fidelity. The game has a style, it has a look, it has a quality to it that you are so engaged and engrossed with that world that yes, you do notice that those visual performance issues are there. However, it's so easy to overlook it because you're so engrossed with the fun. And I really suspect that we're going to find out that's going to be the same case here, that you're going to run into a situation where the game is at 30 frames per second and you wish it weren't, but it's going to run so well at that 30 frames per second and you're going to have so much fun with it that you'll probably be able to overlook it. And if you can't, well, then I'm sorry that you can't. I understand there are people out there like that where they can't get over that things. If that's the hill you want to die on and you're not going to be able to allow yourself to have fun with a game that's locked at 30 frames per second, then that's just going to end up being your loss. It is a shame. I'm not going to defend the fact that it is a shame that these consoles can't perform as well as, what we were sold on 2 years ago when they came out that they would be able to do. So that is clearly a disappointment, but I'm not going to let it sour my fun on this game. I'll get past it. Ryan did ask Todd about optimizing and whether or not it helped with combat. And Todd said that it did, in fact, help with combat on like Fallout 4. But when it came to Starfield, it really helped out more on the graphics than anything. So they talked about something we touched on earlier, and that was it's been 8 years between Fallout 4 and Starfield. 76 was in there, but that was not directed by Todd. So, another 8 years. He said it's not his plan. And if it was, it becomes the question, how many games does he have ahead of him? It starts to enter your head. And again, if I'm Microsoft and I'm Phil Spencer at this point in time, and I've spent all this money, it's not. He said in that interview, by the way, that it's only capped on console. It's not capped on the PC. So again, if I'm Microsoft, right, and I've purchased this asset package, let's just refer to them as an asset package and not a studio, and I have these 3 massive IPs, and while I love and respect Todd's vision and what he's been able to do with these, there have been other studios, Obsidian, make Fallout games, New Vegas, that have been well received and fantastic games. I do it again, like step Todd back, give him oversight and say, hey, look, you can't have the level of control that you necessarily want, but you're going to be able to have a high quality input on these 3, intellectual properties, but we're going to start having to do some parallel development a little bit more than we're doing now because we have to speed up the cadence of these releases because we have to get our money back from this giant check we wrote for ZeniMax. All right. So inspiration, I've been guilty of saying this. I have definitely said Starfield. That's like No Man's Skyrim. I've seen it before out there on the internet. That's not one of the places where he alluded to. I guess it might be a little bit questionable had he, but he did pull a game kind of out of the ether and said it was more like Red Dead Redemption 2. And the reason being is that when you're in that world and when you become that character and you become part of that world, and that is what they're aiming for, is the immersion that they have. It's not the systems. It's not that it's a NASA punk game or a spacefaring science fiction game. It's that it's a role-playing game and it's set in this universe and you become a member of this universe, and it becomes that immersive and that you're that engrossed in part of it. Ryan asked him, like, this is so big. This game is so big. And, what do you think if people just skip the story and they go and play it the way they want to? Because it seems like there's a lot to do. And, Todd said, that's fine. We're okay with people ignoring the story and doing their own thing. We give them the menu. It's a large game. There's a lot to it. It can be complicated. Players want those options. And the more they give to Starfield, the more that Starfield is going to end up giving back to them. There's 1,000 planets. We keep hearing this over and over again. One of the first things I want to do is go to one of these planets and check it out, and then go to it in a different save and see if there's a difference, right? Because I keep talking about procedurally generated, so I don't think they've been extremely clear on that. If every 1,000 planets is the same for everyone, I'm hoping that's the case. I think the procedural tools that they use to help them make it for the game, but it'd be interesting to see if we actually do see variations between playthroughs, right? Like if maybe there is the core planets that follow the main narrative, but then you could run into issues where people get bad seeds and aren't able to farm as well as others. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. And then Ryan asked him some more about post-release conceptually. Will we do add-on contents? Yes, they're going to do all those things. They love it. They're going to have story expansions. They'll have things of various sizes, features and stories that they want to add. I really would like to see them take this game and make it like a platform. I don't want to say like a game as a service like you'd get with Diablo or things like that, but they've built a very large and, from all intents and purposes, a robust game. We haven't really been able to get our hands on it yet and validate that for ourselves, but they've built this massive universe, right? So you don't necessarily have to make a Starfield 2, right? You could just build a really robust expansion and stick a story in there. And if the tech is so advanced, I mean, unless you're trying to get more people to purchase it because they're like, oh, I want to purchase a sequel as opposed to purchase a content expansion. But I'd really like to see how they do that with such a big world, if they can just interject stories and interject expansions in there more so than having to go the traditional, we're going to make a sequel. Because this is definitely something that if it were a multiplayer game, they would definitely be making this as a game as a service. Can you take that same model for a single player and offer them that kind of content drip and see what happens with it? Just don't sell me cosmetics for $20 because I'll never play your game again if you did that on a single player game. So they want to have memorably cool scenarios. So Ryan asked Todd about one of his most memorable things that happened while they were testing, what a memorably cool scenario might have been. And Todd said that he was down on the surface of a planet and some enemy ships landed. He got in a firefight with them, ended up running on the ship, and then the ship took off into space with him in it. And he was like, can that happen? Yeah, I guess that can happen. So Todd, got flown off into space and learned the hard way that you can, in fact, get basically kidnapped in your own game. Ryan asked Todd, what does success look like? With Game Pass, they're going to have the biggest audience they've ever had at launch. The game will get into a lot of people's hands. He looked at this as like multiple phases, right? So people say they'll either, when it first comes out, they love the game or they hate the game. But people are loving the game right now before it comes out. And there's going to be like that first week and how people respond. And then there'll be what do the people think after a year? And then what do the people think after the second year? Does this game stand the test of time, right? They don't think everybody's going to burn through it in 30 hours, so they're not worried about that. But for the success for them is going to be a long-term goal, not just an immediate week or two after release. Personally, I'm interested in what the metrics for success will be because of how different this game is at launch compared to most, because the fact that it is in Game Pass, right? it is so prevalent that everybody will have access to it that has Game Pass. What's the unit number that they need to sell? Will we ever know how many units are sold because of how many subscribers will play this that would have been purchasers? So will we hear a surge in subscription for Game Pass? Be interesting. Speaking of which, if you want to learn how you can get Game Pass for free every month, even after the purported price hike that next month, make sure you go check out my YouTube, Rob Melton Raps. I have a video on there which will walk you through how to use the Microsoft Rewards program and guide you to be able to get so many points per day that you'll be able to purchase Microsoft Game Pass PC or Game Pass Ultimate for yourself each and every month, and it won't cost you a thing. So you can effectively play Starfield for free. Then Ryan asked again about Elder Scrolls, and it could be Todd's last game, but that's like another 8 years from now. Todd wants Fallout 5 to be his, but it could be any of these three. Would you want to work with any of them? Ryan asked Todd if he would want to work with any of the other studios that are in the Microsoft game stable, and he responded that it was a difficult decision. And I didn't think he added a lot of clarity to it. He basically made it feel like he wants to be the one to do it. And it's hard to blame him for that. But at the same time, I do think that the leadership in the Microsoft studios does need to kind of come in and say, hey, look, this is how we're going to do things. We appreciate everything that you have done. But it's time to maybe start handing those reins to other developers, other leads, and other creative potential directors, and let's get these games going. So to get back at the locked at 30 frames per second topic, so this one might be a little bit older than last week, but let me pontificate. This one might be a little bit older than last week, but let me pontificate for a few minutes here on why I believe being locked at 30 frames per second is just a little bit overrated. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is lower than 30 frames per second. And again, I just previously mentioned this not a few minutes ago, but it's going to run away with the Game of the Year awards. And I can sit here and make legitimate case as to why it's the best game ever. And it all comes down to this: gameplay over graphics, right? Gameplay over graphics. The game plays so well that you forget that you were playing it on like an Etch-a-Sketch. No, it's not really that bad, but the game is fantastically beautiful because of the art style, and the gameplay is so well that you forgive it, that it chugs in certain scenarios for things that you wouldn't forgive, like a Redfall, which is not anywhere near as good of a game and has performance issues. So that brings me to our community question of the week. I kind of cheated on this one. Again, I pulled this one off of a comment in my YouTube channel. And this one is from Hungry Puppy 7491. Why won't Bethesda/Microsoft show any console captured gameplay for Starfield? Every trailer, tease, or whatever you want to call them for Starfield was made with top of the line PC captured video at 60 frames per second. The backlash from Xbox owners once they finally get to see how the game looks like for them will be epic. Rewatch the beginning of the Starfield preview from the Xbox Starfield Direct showcase. The only notation said in-game footage, nothing warning console players that it was not the quality image that they will get. The worst part, most all video game developers use the same deceptive tactic. Show one thing, but deliver less. In regular commercial advertising, this is called bait and switch and is illegal. Why is it legal for video games? Arcane/Microsoft didn't reveal Redfall would ship locked at 30 frames per second until 2 weeks before it was released. As of today, they're still finishing Redfall. But Bethesda won't even show 1 second of gameplay video using console captured gameplay. Why is that? I'm predicting tons of video glitches at a minimum when the game releases, with multiple as we work diligently to correct the problems. Apologies shortly afterwards to calm the masses. Hey, that's a great question, but let's take this from the top, right? Every trailer, tease, or whatever you want to call them for Starfield, yes, they're going to put their best foot forward. They're going to show captured on PC because that is what's going to look the best. And that is playable by people. It's not something that regular folk won't have access to. When you watch, and because you brought this up, when you watch commercials for cars on TV and they show you, this car starts at $20,000 and then model as advertised underneath there, $35,000. That's not bait and switch. That's them putting their best foot forward and showing you the best possible product. And then when you actually get to make the purchasing decision, they're like, oh, by the way, there is like this version that you're going to get that doesn't cost as much, but also isn't quite as nice. This one, the price is the same, but you're playing it on a lesser system, this case being a console as opposed to a PC, right? There's, no judgment on whether you want to play on console or not. I play on console and PC all the time, but just one is going to perform better than the other. That's just the way it is. So again, that is why. Also, dude, look at any kind of advertising you had for food. Look at a menu. Do you ever get anything served at fast food that looks remotely close to the picture on the menu? It's not bait and switch. You want to talk about bait or switch? Go ask Best Buy in the 80s about bait and switch. That is when you would send out an advertisement to the public saying that you had something and you didn't ever have it. And then they would come in and you would sell them something different. So I can see why you might confuse the two, but no, it happens all the time in advertising. This is not bait and switch, but I do understand your frustration. It's like, when can I see some footage that is captured on a console? Hopefully soon. Hungry puppy, or should we call you hangry puppy? It seems like you might be a little bit frustrated, with good reason. Hopefully we'll see that footage soon, but that's all I can tell you. Maybe we'll see it soon, but what they're doing is not illegal. It's very comparable to anything else that's happening out there. It's just the way it is, right? On Reddit, there's one user that is parked outside of ZeniMax Studios, and he's waiting to get his copy. So let's see. Film_acre_639 posted a picture of him sitting outside ZeniMax Media Incorporated saying, I'm visiting the area for work and I just thought I'd drive by. Super excited for this game to come out. Wish the lobby was open so I could see all those cool statues they have. So he's like, I thought I'd come by and get my copy early. Good luck with that. Good luck trying to go in and not have security walk you out. All the best. That leads us to my question to the community. Do you think Starfield will overtake Skyrim, right? So it's been 2011 since Skyrim. We're going to be just short of 12 years since Skyrim came out. It's still ubiquitous. People still use it as a litmus test to measure role-playing games against that are high fantasy. People figured out ways to put Skyrim, whether, jokingly or not, on a refrigerator. Do you think that we'll get to the point that Starfield will overtake Skyrim as the go-to RPG? Personally, I think a lot of it's going to boil down to whether you like sci-fi or whether you like fantasy. But maybe I could be wrong. Maybe Skyrim's going to fall to the wayside as Starfield gains in popularity. We'll see. Thanks for those of you that tuned in. Thanks for you that are listening. You can find me at Rob Unwraps on YouTube and Twitter. You can find the VOD of the show on the Starfield Plus YouTube channel. It'll be so long that I'll have to break it up. For those of you that are listening, you'll find it on all your regular podcast services. If you have any story suggestions or tips, you can email me at starfieldpulse@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, or to subscribe and write a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, and I'll see you next week.